So today we're riding the second leg of day 3 on our on the bikes in Thailand, and this is one of our shortest days. Hang on, let me just cut that music. Yeah, this is one of our shortest days on the Thailand ride, and before we start going into the 100+ days for the rest of the tour, and we actually finish or we ride to a beautiful temple today, which you'll see on today's ride, which is pretty cool. So enjoy the scenery. We're going through more beautiful plantations and down the coast, and it's just it's a really beautiful day on the bike. Now today I'm joined by Tomo and Julianne Hazlitt, who they're going to have a chat and help us get through the next Ks. Better known to her friends as JA, Julianne is a workforce optimization specialist. Originally from Ireland, she's lived and travelled and worked her way around the world before eventually settling in the eastern suburbs of Sydney 17 years ago. JA has always loved sport and used to ride horses, play hockey and snowboard. It wasn't until 2010, however, that she decided to buy a road bike and give triathlons a go. Today, Julianne is part of the Belarus cycling team, which is a team of non-professional endurance cyclists, passionate about riding bikes and pushing boundaries of what you can achieve if you can let go of fears, take a step outside of your comfort zone and dedicate yourself to your goal. Here to talk all things endurance racing, including breaking the female team record in the Race Across America, is Julianne and Tomo. So I'll pass it over to you guys.
Thank you, CT. It's an absolute pleasure to have this lady on board with us on the Hands Across the Water ride to provide virtual challenge. I've known JA now for only a handful of years, and how I got to introduce myself, how we got to introduce each other was through the Velaroos. Now, for those of you on your bikes, you've heard of the Kangaroos, you've heard of the Hockeyroos, you've probably heard of the Socceroos, but have you heard of the Velaroos? Well, if you haven't, you should by now, because the Velaroos have done some extraordinary things. And Julianne, is, I guess, that she has guided this team to where it has reached the top, as far as I'm concerned. And we'll talk about that over the next half hour, 45 minutes. Welcome to you, JA, and welcome to Hands Across the Water, the virtual challenge.
Thanks, Mike. Lovely to be here. How's everybody going? I hope you're all pedaling away.
Well, look, CT said that you've been here for 17 years. I can detect a very slight Australian twang in that accent.
I've been practicing that accent actually for 20 years now. So, yeah, no longer in the eastern suburbs. I'm now over on the other side. I'm North Shore girl these days.
And which part of Ireland were you from?
County Tyrone. I always go to say just outside Belfast, but not really. It's in Northern Irish terms, it's quite far from Belfast. I come from the country. It's called Dungannon.
I saw this great series on Netflix called Dairy Girls. Have you seen that?
Normal People. That's also very good.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Velaroos. The Velaroos are an extraordinary bunch of women cyclists. In a nutshell, what's it all about?
The Velaroos are basically just amateur cyclists who like a bit of a challenge. And so we started back in 2015. We did Race Across America, which is 5,000 kilometers from one side, from the East Coast, basically, over to Annapolis. So starts in California and finishes in Annapolis. And we did that in a team of 4 and finished it in 6 days, 13 hours, 27 minutes.
Right. Race Across America, over 5,000 kilometers. Now, a lot of the people that are listening to this interview have probably pedaled between 200 and 400 kilometers since the 1st of June. How long did it take you and your colleagues to race across America in 2015?
6 days, 13 hours, 27 minutes.
From California across to, where did you finish?
Annapolis.
Which is just south of New York City, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, that's correct.
All right. Now tell us about that challenge, because it's extraordinary.
We were a team of 4. We had 10 crew because it's one of the races that you actually have crew. And we basically time trialed doing stints of 30 minutes approximately. Really kind of depends on where it was safe to swap over as well, because you have to be a certain distance off the road, and going as hard and fast as we could, one person on the road at a time. And we partnered up, so we were in a pair, and one person would ride, one person would get dropped approximately 10-15k up the road, and we would go as hard and fast to meet that person and then swap. We would do that for 6 hours, then come off, and then the other two would go on and do exactly the same thing. And then in 6 hours we would have some food, a shower if we could find it, but not always possible, get changed, get some food, attempt to try to sleep a little bit, but that's virtually impossible because you're in a moving RV, and so you're getting bumped around as you're moving, so you don't really get very much sleep. If you're lucky, maybe 30 minutes, and then back out on the road again.
And JA, the terrain across the United States, it's quite remarkable, especially over the Rocky Mountains. I mean, the Rockies are probably twice the size of the mountains that we have here in Australia. And not forgetting, you took part in this competition in the height of summer in June. So I would imagine the temperatures across the Mojave Desert were 50 plus degrees. Am I right?
Yeah. When we went through the desert, it was 49 degrees, I think, 48, 49 degrees, which was like cycling in the middle of an oven. It was excruciating. So our team had bottles of water, they had water pistols as well, and they would soak us as we were going as hard as we could, just to keep us hydrated and also a little bit cooler because it was so hot. And a lot of people pull out, even though that's fairly soon into the race. That's where a lot of things start to go wrong for a lot of teams.
So what was the toughest challenge? Was it the desert? Was it climbing the mountains? Was it the endurance? Was it mentally knowing that you had to reach the finish line 5,000 kilometers away? What was it?
I think the heat was definitely the hardest thing for me, coming from Northern Ireland. Even though I've lived here for a long time, I'm still not. Heat isn't really my forte at going at fast and racing. So I definitely, that was definitely one of the hardest things. Going up the mountains, we actually did really well. And I think if you do a lot of hill repeats, it doesn't matter how steep it is, you can train for that even if you don't have the mountains. I rode the Tour de France last year and trained here for that, and I think you can still train for the hills even if you aren't in the mountains like overseas.
Well, we'll talk more about the Tour de France and some of your other achievements in a moment, but just tell me, how did you come across forming this little squad, this little club called the Velo Rouge, an all-female team?
I was a triathlete, and I used to race and do a lot of triathlon with Coogee Triathlon Club. And one of the girls in there, the previous year, had done Race Across America, and she said to me, would you like to do Race Across America in a 2-person team? And I said, absolutely no way, but I'll do it in a 4. And she said, well, if you can get some other girls to come and join us, then we will do it in a 4. So I spoke to Nicole and Tash at the time, and asked them. I raced with them in triathlon, and I knew that they liked riding the bike, and that was their strongest leg in triathlon as well. And so the 4 of us ended up doing Race Across America, training for it together.
Are there still just 4 members in the squad?
No, for every race we've done, we have slightly different team. So there are, I think, 8 or 9 of us at the moment.
All right. So after the Race Across America, and by the way, you can see a documentary was made, wasn't it, of your achievements across America? And you can find that on YouTube somewhere, can't you?
It's on Vimeo. So Anthony Gordon filmed it, and it's free. It's on Vimeo. It's called Ram Bam Thank You Ma'am.
That's right. Okay. So after that, you went to Ireland. Tell us about that.
Yes. In 2017, Nicole and I were going to do it in a 2-person team, and unfortunately Nicole got sick just a couple of months beforehand. So I ended up going back in a 4-person team. and did race around Ireland, which is 2,500 kilometres around the coast of Ireland. A lot of twists and turns, and navigation was key in that race.
Oh, before we talk about Ireland, just back to Race Across America, you actually won your category, didn't you? Let's talk about that first.
Yes, we won the race. We broke a 19-year record, and we actually got the team for we won the award for the best crew as well. And yeah, broke a 19-year record by completing it in 6 days, 13 hours, 27 minutes.
Wow.
Not exactly, but I do.
That's just fantastic. So in Ireland, how did you finish up? And mind you, the weather conditions were totally opposite to what you experienced in the USA, correct?
Yes. There's a little bit more wind and rain. Being very typical Irish, and also being coastal. A lot of the race are right around the coast. But yeah, an absolutely spectacular race. Every terrain, and we were fairly lucky with the weather. It could have been a lot worse. So I think we were lucky for Irish weather. I think we did all right.
Well, I've seen that documentary, and it was presented, I think, on SBS shortly after. And where can we find that particular documentary?
That one is on YouTube, and yes, that one is on YouTube, and it's called Race Around Ireland. So it's pretty easy to find, and just the Belarus.
All right, that's 2017. Let's fast forward now a couple of more years. In 2019, last year, and you did something that I think created a bit of a stir. You covered the distance, covered the stages, covered every single metre of the Tour de France of that year. And what I mean by that is you started the tour from Brussels, like the men did, but 1 day ahead, and 1 day ahead of the men. And you finished 1 day ahead of the men 3 weeks later in Paris. Now, in other words, you competed the Tour de France. You didn't necessarily race because it's a male-only event, but you did something which caused a bit of a stir. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that was a pretty cool experience. Last year, we rode every stage of the tour, as you just said, the day before the men. And so we did exactly the same stages as they did, but the day before they did. And completed the whole thing with this team of girls here called the Internationales. But we had 3 Belarus in the team, Sarah, Anne and Pippa. Pippa was a fairly new mum at the time, so that was extraordinary. The training that she put in on the trainer indoors, most of it, getting ready for that, because Mawson was still very young. Yeah.
Well, J.A., what you did was, by competing and completing the 3,500 kilometres, I think you proved to perhaps some of the skeptics that women can indeed cover long distances like the Tour de France, and perhaps one day in the future, in the not too distant future, let's hope that a female Tour de France, like the men's Tour de France, which has been on since 1903, can resume, because we did have a women's Tour de France once upon a time, some 20 or 30 years ago. Tell us the feedback, tell us the outcome, and tell us what you achieved by competing and completing your exercise of last year.
So last year was extraordinary. Like I said, there were 10 girls. The team was called the Internationales. We had 3 Belarus in it. And then we joined a French team of girls, Donnant des Ailes au Vélo, who have ridden the tour for the last 3 years. And we joined them and rode alongside them for some of it, and some of it we rode by ourselves. And basically, we were out there to prove women could do it and to get the media behind us, and find out, is it something that people wanted? And we had extraordinary media coverage from all over the world. So a lot of film crew from everywhere following us in various stages, interviewing each of the team members at the top of the climbs. and basically broadcasting to the world, because there is not a female Tour de France at the moment, and there really ought to be. So there's a one-day stage, like you said, but not a multi-day stage. And really the one-day stage is more of a crit race rather than anything like what we would say the Tour is, having ridden it. It's a very, very different experience.
Well, I know you didn't race against anybody, but the main aim was to finish each of the stages. And some of the stages, well, they cover distances of over 200 kilometres every day and climb some of the highest mountains. Tell us about that challenge. How difficult was it to, well, complete a distance of over 3,500 kilometres and ride into Paris after 3 weeks?
So I guess the big difference between our team and the pros doing it is we were sleeping in youth hostels and cheap as we could get, and we had to travel. After every stage, we would travel to wherever it was that we were staying, wash our own kit, make our food, get ourselves ready. And so often we weren't getting to bed until midnight, 1 o'clock. And then getting up early the next morning to ride the next stage. So quite a different experience in terms of how much sleep again that we got, and even just preparation for each stage. It was very much up to ourselves, so we got ourselves ready. We didn't have any masseuses, we just kept on going. But the camaraderie in the team was fantastic. We had a lot of laughs, and some of those climbs were absolutely brutal. Again, in the heat of summer, and 25-26% gradients. And you probably had maybe sometimes 3 or 4 of those in any stage. Not all of the stages, but even the stages where they said it was flat, it's very different flat to what we would call flat.
Well, the outcome. What was the outcome from that exercise? Are we closer as a result of you competing and completing the Tour de France in terms of distance? Are we closer to having a Tour de France for women only in the near future?
I think so. So midway through, the ASO announced that they were putting together a committee basically to discuss how they could do it. And then a few weeks ago, they announced again that there should be a women's Tour de France, I think by 2022.
And is that because of the achievements of yourself and the internationals?
I'd like to think so, but I think there's a lot of global pressure on the ASO. All sports now have a female representation. There's a big following for female cycling, and the racing is really exciting. And so some of the excuses that have been used in the past, that nobody's interested in women's racing, it's pretty chauvinistic, and I think those days are gone. And I think globally the world is pushing for equal rights in sport, and we've seen some really good things in football, in rugby, in cricket, and in all the sports, and so cycling should be following hopefully very soon.
And JA, you need a lot of money to do the exercises and take on the journeys that you have over the last 5 years. Race across America, the Tour of Ireland, the Tour de France. You need money, you need sponsors. And tell us, you say that women's sport is still lagging behind. How difficult has it been for you to attract those sponsorships?
So easy. Just joking. It is so not easy. It's very difficult. I think, I'm sure as everybody here is getting sponsors, it's not easy, and there are more and more things that people are looking money for, and various charity events, and so it's very, very difficult. A lot of it we paid for ourselves, and we ran various fundraising events along the way. So we had cinema nights, we did oh gosh, and all the times we sell cycling buffs. We've done lots of different things to try to raise money for all of the different events over the years, but it's been really difficult. And also talking to people and every contact that we know in every industry, because you just don't know who might be willing to support you in some form. And so with the Internationals, Skoda gave us some money last year, but they've really got behind us. We were due to be going back again this year. It's been moved to August. I'm not entirely convinced that the Tour de France is actually going to be happening, but we're training as if it is. and getting ready to go. And Skoda has got behind us for this year's event and are sponsoring us for that.
Are you talking about this year?
Yes.
In August of this year, you're planning on going over again?
That's the plan. But who knows what's going to happen. COVID has slightly got in the way. But yes, if the Tour de France is on and if it's open to the public, then we will be riding.
Okay, well, good luck with that. But look, what is it about women's sport, especially cycling, that is so difficult to attract multinational companies, and especially teams like yourself? I know that you've been banging on about trying to get some sponsors for 5 years, and you tell me how difficult it is. And let's not forget that you are a full-time employee. There are others in the squad who are mothers, looking after little kids, little babies in some respects. And apart from that, you've got to take annual leave from your respective jobs to complete these journeys. It's not easy, is it?
No, definitely not. But it's our passion, and we absolutely love it. So I guess we just use our annual leave to do big adventures, and so that part is kind of what we do. And then because we have full-time jobs, it helps us pay for a lot of it, like I said. But I don't know why sponsorship is so difficult. I think it's sponsorship for everyone, to be honest, is quite hard now, because organizations also need to see the payback. And if you're an amateur, it's difficult to get the coverage sometimes, or people don't know that they will get the media coverage. And as a professional, if it's not covered by the media, it's kind of the chicken and the egg, like which comes first, the media or the actual sponsorship and the races, and then the media follows. Like, how do you get there? And so for the women, it's very difficult, and a lot of the pro racers really don't get paid very much to begin with, because the races aren't on the same level as the men's.
Can you see the day when women's cycling will earn the same respect as the men have?
I would love to see that. I think things are changing, definitely. And I know that with a lot of people that I ride with, they really enjoy watching the women's racing. It's a little bit, it's exciting and a little bit less predictable, because the female racers aren't always as well known. And so, yeah, it's quite exciting to watch some of the women racing.
And JA, you've got your own branding, haven't you? Show us. I think you're wearing a Belarus top there. There it is. Just pull out the camera a little bit. Just lower the camera a little bit. There it is, the Belarus. Are you about to go for a ride? Is that a jersey?
I'm sitting up because I didn't know.
Oh, you are on the bike.
I'm sitting on my trainer.
Yeah. I mean, you have to.
At one stage.
Go on.
Yeah, at one stage talked about me riding along as I was doing the intro, and I was like, okay, well, I'll just get ready just in case.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say you also have to dig into your own finances to fund a lot of your journeys and your clothes, your branding. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So Quare have been. So I guess in Race Across America, we were sponsored by Perla Zumi, and so they were very kind and they gave us our kit, which was fantastic. And in Race Around Ireland, Quare gave us some amazing kit. And so we were sponsored for those two big races. In last year, Atticus sponsored the Internationals for the Tour de France. But most of the time we design and come up with the ideas for our kit and then pay for it again ourselves, but sometimes with some discount. But most of it is self-funded.
And tell us about what you do during the day when you're not riding your bike.
During the day, I'm a consultant. I work for a company called Call Design, and we work with call centres all over the place and help them to make sure they've got the right people in the right place at the right time. So I am a specialist in workforce optimization. So when anyone calls a call centre, I typically work with a lot of the banks, insurance companies, and we basically work out how many staff are needed to answer those calls and make sure that there are people there to take the calls when they come in.
And I bumped into you on several occasions doing charity rides. And apart from doing long distance events, multi-day events, you're also, or the Belarus are very much into riding in multi-day charity events. So you're very busy.
Yeah, it's great. We're always happy to help out if we can. It's really lovely riding with lots of different people, and if we can be ride leaders or help in any way, then I think we're pretty fortunate to be able to do that.
And the other members, some of them I said before are mothers. How do they juggle long distance multi-day events with trying to run a family as well?
I think this is where Zwift or any of the online tools really come into their own. So being able to train at home when kids are sleeping, or just to be able to jump on for an hour or half an hour at some stage through the day when they've got a little bit of time. It's incredible. I don't have kids, but I see what the others are doing, and it's very difficult. And there's a lot of commitment involved in trying to juggle time, use the trainer and jump on whenever they can. And really indoor training has come on so much. Like I remember starting doing indoor training maybe 10 years ago, and it's nothing like what it is today. It's much more enjoyable. And yeah, just jumping on whenever they can at home, and then at the weekends, if they can get out for a few hours, then they do that. But again, that's not always possible when you've got small kids.
And have some pretty patient partners as well, I would imagine.
Very patient and understanding partners who understand the commitment and get behind that as well. Absolutely.
Well, J.A., the Velaroos have been operating now for the best part of 5 years, and you've talked about the struggles financially. What does the future hold?
I think more challenges. Like I said, this year, hopefully we're going back to do the tour again, but that's a little bit up in the air. Who knows? We'll certainly be doing some more charity rides. We also race. We do some crits and some long distance events in Australia. Whatever's happening here, then we get behind it in any way we can. And sometimes we race it, and sometimes we do it for fun. So I think there's plenty of events to get involved in. Even with COVID, there's even just riding out on the roads. It's fantastic. So there's plenty to do on the bike.
But what I mean is, do you plan to one day turn it into a professional little club, trying to secure a full-time sponsor, trying to extend the love that you have for the Velaroos?
Possibly with some younger girls coming through in the future, that might be something we do. At the moment, it's very much about showing people that even amateur cyclists can take on anything, and with a bit of commitment and the desire to do so, can really show the world that we can ride as well. So it's not always about being a professional. It's also the amateur sport. So as we get new members coming through, some of them may turn to be pros, but at the moment we focus on the amateur side of things.
And can you see movements like yours, like the Velaroos, growing around the world? You spoke about the Internationals. Is it growing?
Yeah, definitely. Very much so. So this year for the Tour de France, there was a Dutch team that was going to join as well before COVID hit. So another 10 Dutch girls joining to ride as well, to prove that women could do it.
I don't know if you'll make it across to France in August. What is it, just 2 months away? I can't see too many changes. We're not allowed to fly out of Australia.
I know.
No one's allowed to fly in.
It might be a France.
Yeah, look, I know personally the Tour de France is still scheduled to start on August the 27th. But yes, if there's a second wave of COVID coming through, anything could change. It could change at the drop of a hat. So it's still up in the air. I mean, personally, myself, SBS is still planning to start screening every stage from August 27. We're not traveling. We've been told to stay back. And we're not the only ones. Most of the foreign networks, most of the members of the foreign networks, which usually cover the race and follow the race from start to finish, they're doing exactly what we're doing, watching the race and covering the race, presenting the race from the comfort of their studio in their respective countries. So I wish you luck on that one.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I guess until we're told that we're not riding, we still have to train. So, because if we're told that we need to jump on a plane and get there and we're not fit in any way, then that will be pretty difficult. But yeah, we've got girls again from all over the world, and in some countries that are much worse off than we are in Australia. I think we've been pretty lucky here in general. Yeah, I don't know how it's going to happen, but I guess we just have to live in hope and train and see what happens. And if not, the training goes towards events in Australia, so it's not wasted.
Well, could you do a Tour de France virtual style like we are with Hands Across the Water?
Yeah, definitely. That would be brilliant. And I think that would make it a lot easier because we could have, again, the girls riding from everywhere, and the Dutch girls could also take part because they have definitely, they were pretty quick. I think some of their girls were nurses and so they pulled out pretty quickly.
Well, you know, Race Across America this year, the event you did 5 years ago has been cancelled, was cancelled in June.
Yes.
And there is a virtual edition coming up next week. I think it starts.
Yes, it does. I'm actually going to do the 60 minutes for 12 days. So I have planned to do that. I'm going to join them. But I know Rupert's doing the 5,000 kilometers on a trainer. And for everyone pedaling there, just imagine doing 5,000 kilometers. That's
standing still.
I want to move around a little bit on the bikes. I can't wait to see how Rupert goes. It's going to be a big mental challenge, I think. First few days probably a lot of fun, but sitting and not moving, not seeing the scenery, no freewheeling, it's a pretty tough challenge.
Yeah, we're talking about Rupert Guinness, the former newspaper journalist, cycling journalist, the first Aussie actually to report from the Tour de France in the 1980s. And you're right, J.A., for those who don't know, he's also a highly respected author, written several books on cycling and rowing. He's a former rower, and he'll be sitting on his backside in the one room for probably 12 or 13 days, racing across America from a car yard in the northern suburbs of Sydney with a support crew around him. But I couldn't think of anything more mentally boring. I mean, it's one thing to race across America on location, but to sit in the car yard for 12 days looking at a screen, can you imagine that?
It's tough. It's really tough. And for 12 days, it's a long time. Like I said, when in a team of 4, we did it in 6 days. Solo is a whole different kettle of fish. There's a lot of highs and lows, and there certainly will be sitting on a trainer for at least 12 days. It's going to be a very, very tough challenge.
But J.A., it could be the way of the future. I mean, the world has changed since the coronavirus kicked in. We're changing our habits in most of the things that we do. Who knows what the future holds? Who knows whether or not we'll be able to do endurance events like you've done over the last 5 years? Maybe the virtual challenges like Hands Across the Water and Race Across America will be the way of the future. How do you feel about that?
I think they'll definitely, I think there's a place for it regardless, because I think virtual challenges are difficult, but they're also make it much more accessible for so many people. You don't have the travel, you don't have to go anywhere, you know, you train at home and it's a safe environment. Yeah, there are a lot of advantages as well to the virtual training and virtual racing. No crashes. You don't come away with broken bones, hopefully, unless you fall off the bike. But I think there is certainly a place for it. I think we're seeing things changing, and even if things do go back to normal, I think you'll still see a lot of virtual events, because for some people it really works. And so the technology has improved. There's been lots of updates to lots of different pieces of software, and I think we'll see lots of new things coming where you can just train and work and do these things from home. Certainly my job has changed significantly. I've been working from home for the last, I don't know how many months, since early March. And I used to be on a plane a lot and travel around the country. And now all my meetings are either through Teams or Zoom, and I love it. I don't necessarily want to go back to having to jump on a plane for meetings all over the place. So of course I miss the travel a little bit, but I'm quite happy having a lot of my meetings virtually rather than having to go to the airport.
That's fantastic. Tell me, J.A., you are training for an event that may not be on in August, but what sort of training are you doing? What sort of distances? How many days a week?
Well, before I had an accident 2 weeks ago.
Well, tell us about that. What happened?
So I was training 2 weeks ago in the morning, and the sun was in my eyes, and I totally didn't see a parked car, which I've often wondered how on earth anyone does that. But there was a white parked van, and unfortunately my head went through it, through the windscreen. Yeah, so I had some plastic surgery here and here. And so I've been off the bike now for 12 days, but I'm just about ready to get back again. I will be back training now. I'm very lucky. There was nothing broken, which I'm very happy about. And I had a sore arms from the C8 nerve in the back of my neck, but they seem to be good now as well. So I'm extremely lucky. The Irish leprechauns were looking out for me, and the injuries aren't as bad as they could have been. And so I'm back training. So before that, I was probably doing close to 500k a week. Sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, depending on what was happening. So as with all of my endurance events, I do most of it outside. I do 200, 250k rides at the weekend, depending, like one of the days, and then a shorter ride. And then lots of short rides before work most mornings.
Just back to the accident. So you went through that windscreen face first, not helmet first.
I headbutted it. I think, but I think my helmet probably broke it a little bit, hence why my face isn't as cut up as it could have been. And I had my my sunnies on as well, which protected my face a lot. So I will never ride without sunnies. Because they certainly saved my face.
Have you become a little bit apprehensive at returning? You say you're pretty close to returning, but how do you feel?
Yeah, I'm certainly a little bit nervous. I'll probably do a little bit more on the trainer to begin with, just to make sure that, because my hands have been sore, I just want to make sure that they're okay before I go out in the roads.
And look, you do 500 kilometers a week, you say, give or take. Tell us about your fitness. What does it do to your body in terms of keeping fit? How fit are you?
I think it was quite interesting because when I was in hospital for 2 days, and every single doctor and nurse would look at my heart rate first of all and say, "You're pretty fit, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yes," because my heart rate was very low. And I think that's the first sign is when the machine gets below 50, and at times mine was at 38. So very, very, very low heart rate, resting heart rate. And of course, when you're lying still, then it tends to drop even more. But yeah, so I think in terms of the recovery as well, just being fit, I have bounced back pretty quickly, and I'm very fortunate with that. So being fit helps in lots of ways, I think, I love being outside. I love riding with friends. I love meeting people and seeing new places. And the bike has really been my way to see lots of different places around the world. And I absolutely love it. So I think mentally, it's a great way to unwind, to think about something else other than maybe the pressures of work or whatever's going on at home. And so, yeah, the bike has been fantastic for that. And staying fit and meeting lots of people. But I think the thing that I say, I used to run, I used to do triathlon, I used to swim a little bit, and I've done all sorts of sports, but the thing I love about cycling the most is the camaraderie and the friendship that you build with so many different people from everywhere. And no matter where you go, you meet so many people. And when I travel for work, I usually tend to pack a bike. And again, I've been very fortunate to meet lots of people when I'm in Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth, New Zealand, wherever I am with work. I've seen some fantastic places and met some fantastic people.
Yeah, the bike can take you to so many different places. You're so right, and the freedom that it gives you. I love the outdoors, but you're right. The indoor phenomenon has really taken over. I've fallen in love with Zwift, especially this time of the year when it's cold and the temperatures are plummeting. There's nothing better, and it's dark outside as well. I mean, this morning here in Sydney, it's a little bit wet.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's winter is the best time for the indoor stuff. Zwift, Full Gas, all of those programs, they're great. And there's so many different ones. I know there's like 4 or 5 others that have come on the market recently. So there's lots to choose from. And lots of different methodologies behind the training. So Full Gas is very much where you see the scenery, and you're riding amongst it, not so much that you're, it's not so digital, even though it is digital, it's slightly different. It looks more like you're on the road, whereas Zwift is obviously, you are that little person as you watch. So.
And J.A., tell us about the food intake. What sort of diet do you have? What sort of nutrition do you follow?
Well, we are sponsored by Pure, which is a Kiwi brand, Pure Sports Nutrition. So we use a lot of their products. They have, they're very clean. they don't have anything else in it. So I have their protein powders and their electrolytes and things like that. So when I'm doing endurance, obviously I have the electrolytes when I'm out in the road and the protein shakes when I come back. But otherwise, I like to live off real food a lot, and of course we have bars as well, but if I can, and depending on what it is, if you're not doing a race and you have time to have real food, then I am very well known to pack an egg sandwich in my pocket and head off.
Does the sandwich come out of your pocket the same way as when you put it in?
It might be.
Hey, J.A., once I interviewed a professional cyclist, Marcel Wust, a German, a lovely guy who's long retired now. And I think he competed in 10 Tours de France and he had a career that spanned some 12 or 15 years. And I asked him once, do you know how far you've ridden in your career on a bicycle, both in competition and in training? And he said, yeah, I have calculated it. I have worked it out. I have ridden the equivalent of riding to the moon and halfway back. I'm not exactly sure how far that is in kilometers, but have you worked out how far you have ridden in your life since 2010 when you took on the bike in terms of training and competing?
No, because I don't always record. Sometimes I like to ride with no numbers and no anything. So I don't always record things or put them on Strava or any of those things. I just ride for the sake of it. So I have absolutely no idea. But of my recorded miles, I think last year I did maybe close to 30,000 kilometers. So
wow.
Yeah. So
people don't drive that far in a motor car.
I wouldn't drive that far in a motor car.
Well, it's only 24 hours in a day. How could you?
Yeah, no, I don't like driving, but on the bike it's very different.
All right, look, we're coming to the end of our ride. I want to wish you luck, and I want to wish you all the best for the future, because you have done so much in promoting women's cycling, and I love the colours of Belarus. Pink for girls, pink for girls. Just pull out the camera one more time and leave it out there for a bit so we can see the branding. There it is, Belarus, and I guess the Velo is for bike cycling, and the Ruse, of course, is for Australia.
Yeah.
So keep going. We'll try and support you at SPS as much as possible, and get that brand out there, because you've done wonders for women on bicycles.
Thank you very much. Keep pedaling, everybody. Have a great time. Hope you get all those kilometers in pretty soon.
There she is, Julianne Haslett, member of the Belarus.
Thank you.
That was amazing. That was such a great chat, and just really interesting that Julianne mentions about just virtual rides and the place for them in the future. And we've had so many people reach out who can't ride in Thailand for different reasons, and they're just loving this experience because it's bringing Thailand to them. And we've got a couple of riders in New Zealand who have got shoulder injuries, and so they're able to get on the bike and not have to, you know, worry about being out in traffic and being on the road. So these rides have really brought just a different level for people. So thanks both of you for the chat this morning.
Pleasure to see you.
I'm on Team Tour de France female. I would love to do that. Absolutely. Peter and I love France. What's that, Julianne?
I said you can see the arrow from the Tour de France behind me.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I love it. So, well, that's a wrap for today, guys. 40's asked a question. He said, do we get pizza for lunch, CT? Unfortunately not today. But the end of this day in Thailand, we do get treated to an amazing Italian dinner in a very sleepy beachside town. Tomo, you might remember it, the pizza and pasta night.
I do remember it. I gorged myself because it was a nice change. I'm not criticising the Thai food, but when you have a day in, day out, it's really nice to have some pizza and pasta. And I remember walking out of that restaurant holding my stomach because I almost fell over when I left the restaurant.
That was carb loading for the rest of the tour.
And I remember we had a bottle of red wine that night. The air temperature outside is 31 degrees. It's not advisable to drink red wine when it's 31 degrees. You've got to dip it in an ice bucket, which is not a common thing to do either.
Oh, I love it. The memories. Yeah. So look, later today, guys, we're joined by, so Pete's going to be having a chat with a guy called Cameron Mostyn, who he was part of a team of 4 who rowed across the Atlantic. So that's a pretty phenomenal story as well.
Atlantic Ocean.
Atlantic Ocean. What was it? 4,500.
Oh, you said road. I thought you meant road, but you mean
road.
No.
Hey, we've got some amazing people on this ride, but no, not right.
I was thinking of a paddle boat.
A rowboat.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha.
So they'll be coming up for a chat at midday today if any of you fancy getting back on the bike. But for now, enjoy your morning and we'll see you all again either later today or tomorrow. And thanks again, Tomo and Julianne.
Pleasure. See you,
Thank
Julianne.
you. Thanks
See you.
so much.